Well, a fortress of protection is that time where you are at your wit's end and you don't have the resources and you need to hold on to God with everything that you have. There's another one, and I'll kind of refer to it as the hedge. And it is found in Scripture in one particular spot, but it's kind of an area that perhaps we don't talk about as often. It's found in Job, chapter 1, verse 10. Is probably the most popular. It's mentioned a number of times in Scripture. If you kind of went through your concordance, you'd find the word hedge a number of times. But I think the most important time in Scripture where you hear the word hedge is Job chapter 1, verse 10. And in that particular passage of Scripture, Satan is talking to God, and God says, hey, you can consider Job. And Satan says, well, of course Job is going to serve you. You have put a hedge around him. So not only he is affected, but his family's not even affected either. Of course he's going to serve you. You have to bribe them somehow, God. Well, it wasn't the case. But this whole aspect of the hedge of protection. What's the difference between a hedge of protection and a fortress of protection? Well, a fortress of protection is that time where you are at your wit's end and you don't have the resources and you need to hold on to God with everything that you have. A hedge is somewhat different. A hedge is, sorry folks, got a little loud there, didn't I? No. A hedge many times in scriptures was a property divider. And many times the people will put a hedge up to kind of guard their crops from animals and trespassers and stuff like that. But there's also a hedge that is known in Scripture, and I think that is kind of what's being referred to here in the book of Job. It is I guess the term is used Boma, and maybe you don't know what the term Boma means, but for those of you who watch those survivor shows where they kind of put somebody in a helicopter and they drop them in the middle of Africa and they said, hey, here's a knife and here's a pot that you can cook water. And so why don't you just stay here and see if you can last for 30 days? You ever seen those shows? So what they do is they kind of find a place where there's water and a place where they can live. And what they do is they create what's called a boma. What's a boma? Well, it's a bunch of bushes which have a whole bunch of high thorns in it, and they build a big surrounding area, usually against a wall or usually around a tree or a strategic position. And what takes place is you build it so that you can start your fire in there and wild animals won't come in and kill you. See, the difference between that place where you are paralyzed and need protection is different than the times when you need to practically live and have protection. And so a boma is that time where you have to actually continue to live, right? You still have to live, don't you? It's not like Fort Knox. It's like a modern day car. Now, for those of you who have jalopies like me, you may not realize this, but the protection in a lot of these new cars is absolutely amazing. Not only do they have a bumper, well, my car has a bumper, it's good, but they'll have collapsible engines so that if you get in a head-on collision, that engine will collapse, and they have front airbags, and they have side airbags, and they have reinforced steel. And if you drive cruise control and you drive too close to someone, it'll automatically keep you a certain distance away. As a matter of fact, many of the cars now have an automatic brake system, whereas even if you don't put the brakes on, it'll put the brakes on for you. And so the thing is, you are operating in the car, but there are safety features which are in place that help you to operate while you go. A hedge of protection. We may even call it a covering, something along those lines to keep the trespassers out, different from a fortress, and gives us the protection. But eventually, here's the thing, you got to get back to the world. And Psalm 91 talks about protection from the deadly pestilence. It says that no harm will overtake you or no disaster will come upon your tent. It is the fact that God is somehow watching over you while you go out and live in the world, while you somehow make a difference. I remember when I was 28 years ago, and I remember this because my daughter is 28. But in the community that I lived in, people just kind of let their kids go to school, and they let their kids walk home from school, and everything was fine for a long period of time until someone came into the community named Paul Bernardo and took Leslie Mahaffey and Kristen French and abducted them, and they were killed. And so while this whole process was going on, I remember that the number of cars that were dropping kids off to school increased significantly, just increased. No longer would parents allow their kids to walk to school, even if it was only half a block. Fear had set in. There was a new normal that had taken place. And I will say this to you now, even 28 years later, you would have thought that the car riding would have subsided. It never has. In that particular community, most parents will drive their kids to school and drop their kids to school and pick up their kids to school because something had happened. I often wonder with COVID-19, we will get back to some reasonable state of normal. But there will always be something inside of us that says, I need to be a little bit more careful. In the midst of that, folks, we still have to live. You still have to go out. You still have to live life. You still have to be effective for Jesus. Well, that's when we begin to pray, God, set a hedge about me. Help me in the process to make a difference. But I would imagine that I'm going to be vulnerable to some point because I'm actually going to be in the world. But to be effective, I actually have to be in the world. So God, cover me. Not only that, cover my children. Somehow protect me. Psalm 16, verse 8, I keep my eyes on the Lord. With him at my right hand, I will not be shaken. 1 Peter 5:7, cast all of your anxiety on him because he cares for you. Hebrews 13:6, so we say with confidence, the Lord is my helper. I will not be afraid. What can mere mortals do to me? It's important to understand that there's a fortress, but also the fact that there is a hedge that God provides because we got to live.